Please, somebody help me. My baby. I can't breathe.
She crashed to the floor. First class, seat 2A, 8 months pregnant. Her knees hit the aisle hard.
Please.
Her fingers clawed at the carpet, gasping, fading.
We need a doctor. Now! Is anyone a doctor? We need medical assistance immediately. If there is any medical professional on this flight, please come to the front of the cabin now!
183 passengers. Dead silence. Not one person moved. Then from the last row of economy, a black teen in a torn hoodie stood up. Started walking toward first class. Calm.
Where the hell do you think you're going, boy?
The teen pulled his arm free, looked the man dead in the eyes, and kept walking. What happened next left her billionaire husband frozen, watching the security footage from a hospital room, shaking, unable to speak. But before we get to what happened on that plane, you need to understand something first. You need to know where Preston Anderson came from, because once you do, everything that happens next hits different. Preston was 17, lived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, a small shotgun house on the east side, the kind of neighborhood where streetlights flicker more than they shine. The roof had been patched so many times it looked like a quilt. The screen door didn't latch. You had to slam it twice and kick the bottom corner just to keep it shut. He lived with his grandmother, Dorothy Anderson, 68 years old, bad knees, worse back, but the kind of woman who still got up at 5 every morning to make sure Preston had something to eat before work. Yeah, work. Not school. Work first, then school. Preston's alarm went off at 4:15 a.m. every day. Stock clerk at a grocery warehouse. The early shift nobody else wanted. Hauling crates in the dark. And on weekends, dishwasher at a catfish restaurant. Double shifts. No breaks. Most of what he earned went straight to Dorothy. Electric bill, water bill, whatever chicken was on sale that week. But here's the thing about Preston. He never complained. Not once. Not when the hot water heater broke 3 months ago and they couldn't afford to fix it. Cold water every morning since, straight from the tap to the face. Not when the car died last spring and he started walking 1.2 miles to the warehouse in the dark. Not when kids at school asked why he smelled like dish soap and fryer grease. He'd shrug. Smells like money to me. That was Preston. His mother, Angela Anderson, passed away when he was 9. Untreated diabetes. She'd lost her insurance 6 months before the diagnosis. By the time she went to the emergency room, it was too late. His father? Never in the picture. Left before Preston was born. No name on the birth certificate. Nothing. Dorothy raised him alone. On Social Security and whatever she earned doing sewing for the neighbors. She had a sewing machine, old, heavy foot pedal, that had been hers for 31 years. The one thing in that house that truly belonged to her. Remember that sewing machine. It matters later. Now, here's what made Preston different. He had a dream, a real one, specific. He wanted to be an EMT, then a paramedic, then, if he could push far enough, emergency medicine. And he didn't just talk about it. His one luxury was a second-hand phone with a cracked screen. Every night, after homework, after dishes, after Dorothy fell asleep, he'd sit on his bed and watch medical training videos. CPR protocols, the recovery position, how to manage shock, how to keep someone conscious when their body wants to shut down. He practiced on Dorothy's couch cushions. She'd walk in and find him kneeling on the floor, counting chest compressions out loud. She'd shake her head and smile. Every morning, before he walked out the door, Dorothy would grab his face with both hands and say, "You got your mama's hands, baby. Gentle hands. Healing hands." He kept a photo of his mother tucked inside his cracked phone case. Faded, creased. Always there. Then the letter came. Accepted into a pre-med summer pipeline program in Boston, one of 12 spots in the entire country. Low-income students only. Tuition free. Housing free. Travel? Not covered. A round-trip flight cost more than Dorothy's entire monthly income. The morning of the flight, Preston walked into the kitchen and saw it. The table by the window, where the sewing machine had sat for 31 years, was empty. Just a circle of dust where the base used to be. She sold it. The only thing she had. To buy him that ticket. Preston stood there, jaw locked, eyes burning. He turned around. "Grandma, I can't take this. I'm not going." Dorothy grabbed his arm, hard. "Don't you dare waste my sacrifice, Preston. You go become what God built you to be." He picked up his duffel bag, the one with a small red first aid kit keychain clipped to the zipper. A gift from his EMT instructor at the community center, Mr. Dwight Coleman, who told him, "Carry this everywhere. You never know when someone's going to need you." He walked out the front door, slammed the screen twice, kicked the bottom corner. First time on an airplane. The jet bridge rattled under his feet. The cabin smelled like recycled air. The overhead bins were too high. Everything felt loud and unfamiliar. His seat, 42F, last row, middle, next to the lavatory. The worst seat on the plane. He didn't complain. Buckled his seatbelt, looked out the window as Baton Rouge shrank beneath the clouds. Whispered it so quietly nobody could hear. "I'm coming back different, Grandma." But what Preston didn't know was that he wasn't coming back different because of a program in Boston. He was coming back different because of what was about to happen at 38,000 feet. The flight had been smooth for almost 2 hours. No turbulence, no announcements, just the low hum of the engines and the quiet shuffle of passengers sleeping, reading, scrolling through their phones. And then, without any warning, everything changed. But before we get to that moment, you need to know about the woman in seat 2A. Caroline Whitfield. 34 years old, 8 months pregnant, sitting alone in first class. Window seat, left side, blanket over her lap. She was elegant in a quiet way. No jewelry except a wedding band. Hair pulled back. Dark circles under her eyes. Swollen ankles tucked into compression socks. She looked exhausted. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. When the flight attendant came through first class, something small happened. Something easy to miss. The attendant, a woman in her 50s, leaned down and said, "Can I get you anything, Mrs. Whitfield?" And there was something in her voice, a nervousness, a softness, like she was speaking to someone important but trying not to show it. Caroline shook her head, declined the champagne, asked for water and a blanket, placed one hand on her belly, closed her eyes. That interaction? That nervous little Mrs. Whitfield? Remember it. Now. Tucked into the seatback pocket in front of Caroline, barely visible, easy to ignore, was a boarding pass. And on the margin, someone had written a note in neat handwriting. "Call E when you land. He's sending the car." The initial E, the phrase "sending the car," not picking you up, not meeting you there. Sending the car. Small details, but they'll matter more than you think. Here's the thing about Caroline. She'd been having mild contractions since before she boarded. Tight, quick, like a fist clenching low in her abdomen. She'd been timing them on her watch, every 18 minutes, then every 14, then every 11. She told herself it was Braxton Hicks, false labor, her body practicing. She'd make it to Boston. Her OBGYN was waiting there. She just had to hold on for a few more hours. Her husband had wanted her to take the private jet. She refused. She hated the separation. Hated feeling like she lived in a different world than everyone else. She wanted a normal flight, a normal experience. She insisted. That decision, that one small, stubborn decision, was about to change everything. The turbulence hit at 2:17 p.m. Not violent, not the kind that makes oxygen masks drop. Just a firm, sudden shake. Enough to rattle the drink cart, enough to jostle the ice in every cup on the plane. The seatbelt sign dinged on. Caroline winced, gripped the armrest. A pain, sharper than the others, shot through her lower back and wrapped around her belly like a belt being pulled too tight. She gasped. Then another one. Faster. Harder. She stood up. She didn't think. Her body just moved. She needed the lavatory. She needed to splash water on her face. She needed to breathe. She made it 2 steps. That's it. 2 steps into the aisle. Her knees buckled. Her body folded. She collapsed sideways, hard against the armrest of seat 3C. Her head hit the side of the seat with a dull crack. She slid to the floor. First class went silent. Then, chaos. The businessman in 3C, gray suit, window seat, recoiled, pressed himself flat against the wall like she was contagious. Didn't reach out, didn't help, just stared. A woman across the aisle covered her mouth with both hands. A child 2 rows back started crying. Someone dropped a phone. Nora Sullivan, head flight attendant, 53, 26 years on the job, reached Caroline first. She drops to her knees. Caroline's eyes were half open, glassy, unfocused. Her lips were moving, but the words barely came out. "The baby. Please. The baby." Nora checked her pulse. Rapid. Too rapid. Her skin was clammy, cold sweat on her forehead. Nora grabbed the intercom. Her hand was shaking. "Is there a doctor on board? We need medical assistance immediately. If there is any medical professional on this flight, please come to the front of the cabin, now." She waited. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Nothing. She repeated the call, louder this time, almost begging. Nothing. 183 passengers on that plane. Businessmen, professors, consultants. Not one doctor, not one nurse, not one paramedic, not one person with any medical training at all. Nora looked down at Caroline on the floor. She had basic first aid certification, the standard airline training. Band-aids, allergic reactions, minor burns. Not this. Not a pregnant woman in crisis at cruising altitude. The pilot's voice came through the speakers, calm but tight. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are diverting to Philadelphia International Airport. Estimated arrival, approximately 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Caroline's blood pressure was dropping. Her contractions were getting closer. The baby's heart rate, if they could even monitor it, was unknown. 2 lives hanging by a thread, 45 minutes away from help. Nora looked up at the cabin, pleading with her eyes. Somebody, anybody. And then, from the very back of the plane, a seatbelt clicked open. Preston stood up. He'd heard the call. Both of them. He'd been watching the flight attendants rush forward. He'd seen the panic ripple through the cabin row by row like a wave. His heart was slamming in his chest. His hands were steady. He stepped into the aisle and started walking. Row 42, row 40, row 35, row 30. A passenger near the middle of the plane looked up at him, a teenager, faded hoodie, walking toward first class like he had somewhere to be. The passenger muttered loud enough for the rows around him to hear. "Kid's probably looking for the bathroom." Preston didn't hear it, or maybe he did. Either way, he didn't stop. He didn't slow down. He walked straight through business class, past the curtain, and into first class, where Caroline Whitfield was lying on the floor, and not a single person had done a thing. But what nobody on that plane knew What Preston himself didn't know was that in a Manhattan high-rise 40,000 feet below, a phone was about to ring, and the man who answered it was about to have the worst 2 hours of his life. What happened next took exactly 6 minutes. 6 minutes that would be talked about for years. But what Preston didn't know, every second was being recorded by the cabin security camera, and that footage would eventually be watched by someone who wasn't on this plane. Someone who would watch it 3 times and break down on the third. We'll get to that. Right now, Preston was on his knees. He dropped beside Caroline without hesitation. Nora stepped back. She saw a kid, a teenager in a torn hoodie. "Sir, please return to your seat. We have the situation." "Ma'am?" Preston's voice was calm, low, steady. "My name is Preston. I've trained in emergency first aid. I need you to let me help her." Nora froze. She looked at his face. 17 years old. But his eyes didn't look 17. Preston turned to Caroline, half-conscious, breathing shallow, hand pressed against her belly. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." He took her hand, gently. She squeezed, weak, but there. He looked up at Nora. "I need blankets, water, and whatever you have in the onboard medical kit. Right now." His tone wasn't rude. It was firm, clear, the kind of voice that makes you move before you decide to. Nora turned and moved fast. Preston checked her pulse. Rapid, thready. Breathing, shallow, labored. Pupils, responsive but sluggish. He recognized the signs. Preeclampsia. High blood pressure during pregnancy. Combined with dehydration and stress, it could turn fatal. Fast. He rolled Caroline gently onto her left side, the recovery position for pregnant women. Always left side. Takes the weight off major blood vessels, improves blood flow to the placenta. He'd watched a video on this exact scenario 4 months ago. Cracked phone, 11:30 at night. 4 months ago, it was YouTube. Right now, it was real. Nora came back with the kit. Cold compresses, gauze, a blood pressure cuff. Basic, but enough. He placed a compress on Caroline's forehead, elevated her legs with rolled blankets, wrapped a third around her shoulders. Then, gentle questions. Between contractions. Never rushed. "How far along are you?" Eight months. "Have you eaten today?" "No, I skipped lunch." "Any history of high blood pressure?" She nodded, eyes half closed. "Okay, you're going to be fine, both of you. Stay with me." Passengers were watching, some filming. A man in a suit whispered to his seatmate, "Where did this kid come from?" The kid from seat 42F. The kid someone told to sit his ass down. The only person on this plane doing anything. Then the contractions got worse. Caroline screamed, sharp, raw, the kind of scream that cuts through everything. Her back arched, her fingers dug into the carpet. Preston held her hand, tight. "You're doing great, Mrs. Whitfield. Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Stay with me." He monitored her pulse every 60 seconds, lips moving, counting silently, used a second compress on the back of her neck. Then, the worst moment. Caroline's eyes rolled back, her grip went slack, her head tilted. Preston moved fast, tilted her head, cleared the airway. "Caroline, open your eyes. Stay with me. Tell me your baby's name." Nothing. 1 second. 2. 3. Her eyes fluttered open, confused, scared, but open. We haven't decided yet." "Then you've got to stay awake so you can pick a good one. Deal?" The faintest movement at the corner of her mouth, Deal, she whispered. The pilot broke through. 22 minutes to Philadelphia. 22 minutes. An eternity. Preston didn't move. One hand holding hers, the other checking vitals, and he talked. Not about the emergency, about Baton Rouge, about his grandmother's gumbo, slow, for hours, roux so dark it looks like chocolate. Good gumbo don't rush for nobody, baby. That's what Dorothy always says. Caroline listened, eyes open, breathing steadier. He was keeping her conscious with gumbo stories, at 38,000 feet. The plane hit the runway hard, tires screeching, passengers lurching. Philadelphia International. Emergency vehicles on the tarmac. Paramedics boarded within 2 minutes. They reached Caroline. Preston looked at the lead paramedic and said, 34-year-old female, approximately 32 weeks pregnant, hypertensive symptoms, contractions 4 minutes apart, brief loss of consciousness at 14:35, responsive to verbal stimuli, pulse stabilized at 94. The paramedic stopped, stared. Are you pre-med? No, sir. I'm in high school. They loaded Caroline onto the stretcher. As they wheeled her past, she reached out, grabbed his wrist, eyes wet. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Preston nodded, stepped back against the bulkhead. His hands were shaking now, the adrenaline leaving all at once. He looked down at his hands, Dorothy's words in his head. Gentle hands, healing hands. They were trembling, and the craziest part? He had no idea what was coming, no idea who Caroline Whitfield really was, and no idea that in a hospital room in New York, at that very moment, a man was being told his wife had collapsed on a plane, and that a stranger had saved her. The paramedics were gone. The stretcher was gone. The first-class cabin was empty now, just crumpled blankets on the floor, an open medical kit, and the faint smell of cold compresses. Passengers filed off the plane one by one. Quiet, avoiding eye contact. The same people who sat frozen for 6 minutes now walked past the spot where Caroline had been lying, like nothing happened. Nobody said a word to Preston. He was the last one off. Grabbed his duffel bag from the overhead bin, clipped his red first aid keychain back onto the zipper, walked up the jet bridge, alone. No applause, no handshake, no, thank you, young man. Just a few sideways glances from passengers who'd watched the whole thing on their phones and were probably already uploading it. That was it. That was his reward. Sideways glances. But then, footsteps behind him. Fast. Wait, please wait. Nora Sullivan, the head flight attendant. She was half running through the jet bridge, her heels clicking on the metal floor. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. She reached Preston and grabbed both his hands. I've been flying 26 years. 26 years. I have never, not once, seen anyone do what you just did back there. Her voice cracked. You saved that woman's life. You saved her baby's life. Preston looked at her, uncomfortable. He wasn't used to this. Ma'am, I didn't do anything special. I just did what I was supposed to do. Nora reached into her pocket and pressed a folded $100 bill into his palm. Please, take this. It's not enough, but please. Preston looked at the bill. $100. More than he made in a full weekend of double shifts at the Catfish restaurant. He could use it. God knows he could use it. He folded it back into her hand. I can't take that, ma'am. I appreciate it, but I can't. Nora stared at him. This kid, this 17-year-old kid who washes dishes for a living, who just saved 2 lives, and he's handing back $100. Preston paused. Then, but if you really want to help, there's a community center in Baton Rouge, runs free EMT classes for kids in my neighborhood. A man named Dwight Coleman runs it. He could use supplies. He could use anything, honestly. He grabbed a napkin from the jet bridge trash can, wrote the name down, handed it to Nora. She looked at the napkin, looked at Preston. Didn't say anything for a long time. Then she hugged him. Hard. Like a mother would. Preston found a seat near gate B12, found a charging station, plugged in his cracked phone and called Dorothy. He didn't tell her about the emergency, didn't mention the pregnant woman, didn't say a word about what had just happened. "I'm in Philly, Grandma. Layover. I'm fine. I love you." "You eating? You better eat, Preston." He laughed. He hadn't eaten since a granola bar at 5 that morning. "Yes, ma'am, I'm eating." He hung up, leaned his head against the wall, closed his eyes. And that should have been the end of it. A good kid did a good thing. Nobody noticed. Life moved on. Except, it wasn't the end. Not even close. Because while Preston was sitting at that gate with his eyes closed, something was already in motion. The airline's emergency protocol had kicked in the moment the plane diverted. Caroline had listed an emergency contact on her booking. The airline had called that number before the wheels even touched the ground in Philadelphia. That call went to a corner office on the 40th floor of a Manhattan high-rise. And the man who answered? He didn't just send a car. He sent a helicopter. 20 minutes later, a man in a dark blazer walked through the Philadelphia terminal. Calm, polished, late 40s, moving with the kind of quiet purpose that said he'd been told exactly who to find. He found Preston at gate B12, eyes still closed, duffel bag between his feet. "Excuse me, Preston?" Preston opened his eyes. The man handed him a business card. White, crisp. No company name, just a phone number embossed in silver. And on the back, 2 initials. E.W. "Someone would like to thank you properly. When you're ready, call that number." Before Preston could ask a single question, the man turned and disappeared into the crowd. Preston flipped the card over. E.W. He had no idea what it meant, no idea who sent this man, no idea how anyone even knew his name. He slipped the card into his pocket, boarded his connection to Boston, and didn't think about it again. But here's what Preston didn't know. That man in the dark blazer, James, had arrived at Philadelphia International Airport less than 40 minutes after the emergency landing. 40 minutes. From Manhattan. You don't make that trip in 40 minutes. Not by car, not by train. Unless someone sent you by helicopter. The moment they got the call, Preston made it to Boston, settled into the dorm, started the program, and for the first time in his life, everything felt like it was falling into place. The pre-med pipeline program was intense. 12 students from across the country, all low income, all hungry, all fighting for a future that nobody in their neighborhoods thought was possible. Preston was thriving, not just keeping up, leading. In the emergency medicine module, he scored highest in the cohort. His instructors kept asking the same question. "Where did you train?" He'd shrug. "YouTube, and a man named Mr. Coleman." Life was good, simple, focused. And then the strange things started happening. The first one was small, easy to overlook. Preston got a notice from the program office. His tuition had always been free, that was the deal. But now, suddenly, the package had been upgraded. A housing stipend, a full meal plan, new textbooks, all covered. He went to the program coordinator, Dr. Elaine Bradshaw, and asked about it. She smiled, professional, careful. "A private donor has supplemented your package, Preston. That's all I can tell you." "Who?" "I'm not authorized to say." Preston let it go. Figured maybe the program had extra funding. Maybe he got lucky. Then the second thing happened. Dorothy called him on a Tuesday night. Her voice sounded different, confused, a little shaky. "Baby, did you tell somebody about Mr. Coleman's program?" "What do you mean, Grandma?" "Somebody sent a brand new training mannequin to the community center. Full supply kit, CPR equipment, all of it. No return address, no note, nothing. Mr. Coleman almost fell over when he opened the boxes." Preston went quiet. He thought about the napkin, the name he'd written for Nora. Then he thought about the business card, the one in his jacket pocket. E.W. He didn't say anything to Dorothy, just told her that was great news and hung up. Then, the third thing. A letter arrived at his dorm. No return address. Expensive stationery, the thick kind, cream-colored, the kind of paper that costs more than a meal. Inside, handwritten in blue ink, 3 lines. "Both doing well. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. We named him after someone brave." That was it. No signature, no name, no explanation. Preston read it 3 times. His hands were trembling. He sat on the edge of his bed and pulled out the white business card. E.W. He still hadn't called the number, but someone out there knew his name, knew his dorm address, knew exactly what he'd done on that plane, and had already started changing things around him, quietly, invisibly, deliberately. What Preston didn't know, what he was about to find out, was that the person behind that card had already set something much, much bigger in motion. And the next time he heard the name Whitfield, his entire life would change. 3 weeks. That business card sat in Preston's jacket pocket for 3 weeks. He'd take it out sometimes, turn it over, run his thumb across the embossed initials, E.W., then put it back. He told himself he'd call tomorrow. Then tomorrow became next week. Then next week became when I have time. But the truth was, he was scared. Something about that card felt bigger than him, bigger than anything he'd ever been close to. But that letter changed everything. We named him after someone brave. On a Thursday evening, 3 weeks and 2 days after the flight, Preston sat on the concrete steps outside his dorm. The sun was going down. The campus was quiet. He pulled out his cracked phone, pulled out the card, and dialed. 2 rings. A woman's voice, warm, professional, the kind of voice you hear in lobbies made of marble. "Whitfield Capital, how may I direct your call?" Preston's stomach dropped. Whitfield Capital. He almost hung up right there. Someone gave me this card. On a plane, a few weeks ago. A pause on the other end. A short one, but loaded. "Mr. Anderson?" He blinked. "Yes?" "We've been expecting your call. Please hold for Mr. Whitfield." Expecting his call. They knew his name. They'd been waiting. The line clicked. Soft hold music. 10 seconds. 15. Then, a voice. Deep, calm, measured. The kind of voice that's used to rooms going quiet when it speaks. "Preston, my name is Elliot Whitfield. Caroline is my wife." Preston's mouth went dry. His hand tightened around the phone. "I want to thank you. Not over the phone. I'd like to meet you in person. But first, I need you to know something." Preston didn't say anything. He couldn't. "You saved my wife's life, and you saved my son's life. And I have watched you do it, every second of it, more times than I can count. Now, this is where the story cracks open. This is where everything you thought you understood shifts." Elliot Whitfield wasn't just some businessman. He was the founder and CEO of Whitfield Capital Group, a private equity firm valued at over $4 billion. He'd been on the cover of Forbes twice, He sat on the boards of 3 major hospitals along the East Coast. He was one of the wealthiest and most connected men in the northeastern United States. And on the day his wife collapsed on that plane, he was nowhere near her. He was in his Manhattan office, 40th floor, glass walls, a view of the entire city. In the middle of a quarterly review with his board of directors, when his assistant walked in and handed him a note. The note said, "Caroline, emergency landing, Philadelphia." Elliot left the boardroom without a word. Didn't excuse himself, didn't grab his coat, just walked out. His assistant had already called for the helicopter. It was on the roof by the time he got there. The flight from Manhattan to Philadelphia took 41 minutes. 41 minutes in the air. No information, no updates. Just the sound of rotor blades and Elliot Whitfield staring at his phone, waiting for a call that wasn't coming. He didn't know if his wife was alive. He didn't know if his baby was alive. He didn't know anything. When he landed at the hospital, Jefferson University, he ran through the emergency entrance, still in his suit, no coat, November air cutting through him. He found Caroline in a recovery room, stable, awake, IV in her arm, heart monitor beeping steady. She was alive. The baby was alive. Elliot collapsed into the chair beside her bed, grabbed her hand, couldn't speak for 2 full minutes, and then Caroline said it. The same sentence, over and over. "A boy saved us. A teenager. Find him, Elliot. Find him." Elliot called the airline CEO that night. Personal cell. They'd been friends for 15 years. Within 2 hours, Elliot had access to the onboard security camera footage from the flight. Full recording, every angle. He sat in a private room at the hospital, alone, laptop open, and pressed play. This is what he saw. 183 passengers. Frozen. The businessman in seat 3C, the one sitting right next to Caroline, pulling away from her as she collapsed, recoiling, like her emergency was an inconvenience. Nora Sullivan on her knees, hands shaking, calling for help that never came. And then, from the very last row of the plane, a teenager, faded hoodie, worn duffel bag, standing up, walking forward, past every row, past every adult who did nothing, walking into first class like he had every right to be there, kneeling beside a stranger, taking her pulse, positioning her body, talking to her, holding her hand. Calm, steady. 17 years old. Elliot watched the footage 3 times. The first time, his hands gripped the edge of the laptop. The second time, his jaw locked. His breathing got short. The third time, he cried. Not quiet tears. Not a businessman's composed grief. He put his face in his hands and sobbed. Because he saw it. He saw how close he came. He saw the 6 minutes where his wife's life and his son's life hung on the actions of a child that nobody on that plane believed in. He called James immediately, his head of security. "Get to Philadelphia International. Find this kid before he boards his next flight. I don't care what it takes." James made it with 12 minutes to spare. Found Preston at gate B12, eyes closed, duffel bag between his feet, first aid keychain on the zipper, and handed him that white business card. Now, back to the phone call. Elliot's voice was different now, quieter, the composure cracking. "My wife told me what you said to her. You told her she had to stay awake to pick a good name for the baby." Preston closed his eyes, remembering. "You kept her conscious by talking about your grandmother's gumbo, Preston." Elliot paused. His voice broke. "I've watched that footage more times than I can count. I wasn't there. I should have been on that plane. I should have insisted she take the private jet. I'm going to carry that guilt for the rest of my life. A long silence. Then, but you were there, and you didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second. Preston sat on those dorm steps, phone pressed to his ear, tears running down his face. He couldn't talk, couldn't find the words. Finally, one question, barely a whisper. You named your son after me? Elliot's answer came without hesitation. His name is Preston Elliot Whitfield, and I hope, when he's old enough, he becomes even half the man you already are. Preston hung up, sat on those steps for 20 minutes, alone. Then he called Dorothy. He told her everything. The plane, the woman, the baby, the billionaire, the footage, the name. Dorothy was silent for 10 seconds, the longest 10 seconds of Preston's life. Then she said, I told you, baby. Healing hands. Your mama's watching. But Elliot Whitfield didn't call just to say thank you. He didn't send his head of security by helicopter and wait 3 weeks for a phone call, just to say 2 words. He'd already made a decision. And that decision was about to reshape Preston Anderson's entire future. 2 days after the phone call, a black SUV pulled up outside Preston's dorm. Tinted windows. The driver opened the rear door and said 4 words. Mr. Whitfield sent me. They drove to a private airfield. Sitting on the tarmac, engines running, was a Gulfstream G650, a private jet. Preston sat in a leather seat wider than his bed back home. Crystal glass of water on a cloth napkin. He didn't touch it, just sat there, hands on his knees, looking around like he'd walked into someone else's life. 90 minutes later, New York. The elevator at Whitfield Capitol took 11 seconds to reach the 40th floor. Preston counted. The doors opened to floor-to-ceiling windows. The entire Manhattan skyline stretched out below like a model someone had built on a table. Then he heard her voice. Preston? Caroline was standing in the doorway, color in her cheeks, rested, alive. And in her arms, a baby. Small, sleeping, wrapped in a white blanket. She saw him and started crying before he even reached her, hugged him with one arm, the baby in the other. This is Preston Elliot Whitfield, she said. He has your calm. I swear he does. Elliot walked around his desk, shook Preston's hand, firm, long, both hands. Then he turned his laptop around, pressed play. The security footage. Preston watched himself on screen, kneeling beside Caroline, checking her pulse, talking about gumbo. He barely recognized the person. I was that calm? Calmer than anyone I've ever employed. Then Elliot sat down, leaned forward. I didn't bring you here to say thank you, Preston. I brought you here because I want to invest in you. Not charity, investment. Because what I saw on that footage, that's not something you train. That's something you are. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside, 4 items. 1. Full scholarship. 4-year pre-med at any university Preston chose, plus medical school. Fully funded through the Whitfield Foundation. Tuition, books, housing, everything. Until he had the letters MD after his name. 2. The Dorothy Anderson Community Health Fund. $500,000 to transform Mr. Coleman's community center into a fully licensed EMT and paramedic training facility, named after Preston's grandmother. 3. Paid summer internship at Whitfield Capital's Healthcare Investment Division, so Preston could learn where medicine and money intersect and why communities like his get left behind. 4. Immediate support for Dorothy. New hot water heater, roof repair, A reliable car. Elliot's exact words. This one isn't a discussion. It's already done. Preston stared at the folder, his vision blurred. A tear hit the paper. Why? Why are you doing all this? Elliot leaned back, quiet for a moment. Because I had every resource in the world. Money, connections, power, helicopters, and none of it could save my wife. I wasn't even there. I was in a boardroom while she was on a floor. He paused. You had nothing. A torn hoodie, a keychain, and training you got from YouTube and a volunteer. And you didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second. Another pause. I don't invest in resumes, Preston. I invest in character, and I have never seen character like yours. The room was quiet. Caroline was crying. The baby was sleeping. Preston looked at the folder, looked at Elliot, and asked one question. Can you make sure Mr. Coleman gets a salary? He's been volunteering for years. He never takes $1. Elliot smiled. The first real smile Preston had seen from him. Done. They shook hands. Not with contracts, not with lawyers. A handshake between a billionaire and a teenager from Baton Rouge. Caroline placed the baby in Preston's arms. He held him the way he'd held Caroline's hand on the plane. Steady, gentle. Like he was holding something that mattered more than himself. Elliot picked up his phone, took a photo. Preston Anderson, 17, torn hoodie, cracked phone in his pocket, holding a billionaire's newborn son on the 40th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. That photo sat on Elliot's desk for years. He never moved it. As Preston left, he passed James in the hallway. Same dark blazer, same nod. Told you to call. Preston laughed. First real laugh in weeks. He rode the elevator down 40 floors, stepped onto a Manhattan sidewalk, pulled out his cracked phone, and called Dorothy. Grandma, you're getting your sewing machine back, and a whole lot more. Silence. Boy, what did you do? Preston looked up at the building behind him. 40 floors of glass and steel. I just did what you taught me. What happened over the next 2 years didn't just change Preston Anderson's life. It changed Baton Rouge. It changed a community center. It changed dozens of kids who'd never been told they could be anything. And it all started with a boy in a torn hoodie who refused to stay in his seat. But he had his pick of any university in the country. Full ride, no limits. Schools most kids in his neighborhood had never even heard of, let alone dreamed of attending. He chose Howard University, not Harvard, not Yale, not Johns Hopkins. Howard. When Elliot asked why, Preston said, "Because I want to be around people who look like me and are building something. I don't need a name on a building. I need a foundation under my feet." Elliot didn't argue. He just nodded and wired the first tuition payment that afternoon. Preston moved to Washington, D.C., pre-med track, full course load, and from day one, he was different. Not smarter than everyone else, not louder, not flashier, just steadier. The professors noticed it. The kind of student who sits in the front row, never misses a class, and asks the one question nobody else thought of. His first summer, he flew to New York for the internship. He took notes on everything. Filled 3 notebooks in 8 weeks. When the other interns went out for drinks on Friday nights, Preston was in his temporary apartment, mapping underserved health corridors in Louisiana. The cycle was already repeating. Now, the community center. 14 months after the plane incident, the Dorothy Anderson Community Health Center opened its doors. Not the same cramped room with folding chairs and a borrowed mannequin. A real facility. Renovated, equipped, professional. 2 full classrooms. A simulation lab with training mannequins, real ones, the kind that hospitals use. A mobile health clinic parked out back, a converted van with basic diagnostic equipment, a defibrillator, and enough medical supplies to serve 3 parishes. Local news covered the ribbon cutting, then regional news picked it up. Then a national outlet ran a feature. The headline read, "The teenager who saved 2 lives at 38,000 feet is now saving his hometown." Mr. Dwight Coleman stood at the podium that day. First time in his life wearing a tie. His hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from something deeper. He looked out at the crowd, looked at Preston, looked at Dorothy sitting in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. And he said, "I gave that boy a first aid keychain. He gave this community a future." The numbers told the story. In the first year alone, 86 students earned EMT certification through the center. 14 of them were placed in paid emergency response positions across Louisiana. 3 enrolled in nursing programs. 1, a 19-year-old single mother named Tanya Williams, scored the highest on the state certification exam. The mobile clinic served over 2,000 patients in 12 months. People who hadn't seen a doctor in years. People who'd been driving 90 minutes to the nearest hospital for a blood pressure check. And it kept growing. Elliot Whitfield, watching from New York, saw something in the model. Not just a community center, a blueprint, a system that could be replicated. He created the First Responder Pipeline Initiative, seeded with Whitfield Foundation money. 5 cities in the first year: Baltimore, Memphis, Detroit, Jackson, Birmingham. Each one modeled on the Dorothy Anderson Center, each one run by local leaders from the community. Nora Sullivan, the flight attendant who'd offered Preston $100 in that jet bridge, donated her 100 to the center. Then she started volunteering. Every other weekend, she flew into Baton Rouge and taught CPR classes. She and Preston stayed in touch. She never missed a graduation ceremony. And baby Preston Whitfield? He turned 1. His first birthday party was held at the Whitfield Estate in Connecticut. Catered, elegant, 50 guests. But the guest who mattered most flew in from Howard University on a Friday night with a gift in his backpack. A small red first aid keychain, identical to his own. He clipped it to the baby's diaper bag. Caroline laughed. Elliot shook his head and smiled. And Dorothy? She got her sewing machine back. Not the old one, a brand new one, top of the line, the kind with a digital display and an automatic needle threader. She cried when it arrived, sat in front of it for an hour before she even turned it on. She used it to make quilts, one for every room in the community center's waiting area. Thick, warm, handmade. And in the bottom corner of each one, a small embroidered phrase in gold thread. Healing hands. But this story has one more scene, and honestly, it's the one that stays with you. 2 years later, Preston Anderson is 19, sophomore at Howard, top of his pre-med class. He's flying home to Baton Rouge for winter break. Commercial flight, economy seat. Window this time, not 42F. He's got his duffel bag under the seat. Red first aid keychain on the zipper. Cracked phone finally replaced. A gift from Caroline for his 18th birthday. But the photo of his mother is still inside the case. Same spot, always. The flight is smooth, quiet, uneventful. Until it isn't. Somewhere over Alabama, turbulence hits. A few rows ahead, an elderly man clutches his chest. His face goes gray. His body slumps sideways against the window. The flight attendant rushes over, checks on him, grabs the intercom. "Is there a medical professional on board? We need assistance in row 14. Preston is already unbuckling his seatbelt, already standing, already moving. Same calm, same steady hands, same quiet focus. Some things don't change. He reaches the man, kneels beside him, checks his pulse, loosens his collar, starts talking to him in that low, steady voice. The same voice Caroline Whitfield heard at 38,000 feet 2 years ago. But this time, something is different. This time, he's not alone. A young woman across the aisle stands up, fast, no hesitation. She's wearing a lanyard around her neck. Preston catches the words printed on it. Dorothy Anderson Community Health Center, EMT certified. Her name is Tanya Williams, 22, one of the center's first graduates, the one who scored highest on the state exam. They work together, side by side. She stabilizes the man's breathing. He monitors the pulse. They don't need to talk much. They move like they've done this before, because they have. Different rooms, same training, same foundation. The man stabilizes. Color returns to his face. The cabin exhales. This time, the passengers applaud. Tanya looks at Preston, studies his face for a moment. "You're Mr. Preston, aren't you? From the center?" Preston smiles. "You were in the Tuesday cohort." Tanya grins. "You gave us the first aid keychain speech. Carry this everywhere. You never know when someone's going to need you." Preston laughs. A real one. Full. "That wasn't my line. That was Mr. Coleman's." The chain continues. The kindness multiplies. What started with one teenager in a torn hoodie on one plane now lives in dozens of hands across Louisiana. Healing hands. Trained hands. Hands that don't freeze. Preston lands in Baton Rouge at 6:47 p.m. Dorothy is waiting at arrivals. Same spot she always stands. Tupperware container in her hands. The smell hits him before he even reaches her. Gumbo. She hugs him. Tight. The way she always does. Like she's making sure he's real. "You eat yet?" He hasn't. They drive home in the new car, the one that actually starts. Down streets Preston has known his whole life, but everything looks a little different now. The screen door latches on the first try. The hot water works. The sewing machine hums softly from the back room where Dorothy left it running. And on the wall of the living room, framed, centered, lit by the lamp Dorothy keeps on every night, is a photograph. Preston Anderson, 17 years old, torn hoodie, cracked phone in his pocket, holding a newborn baby on the 40th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. 2 lives, connected by 6 minutes at 38,000 feet. And a grandmother who sold her sewing machine so a boy with healing hands could get on a plane.
Bạn nói đúng. Phần C, TA chỉ nên có khoảng 50 từ bolded là bình luận cá nhân của narrator. Phần còn lại là giọng kể bình thường để kết thúc câu chuyện và kêu gọi hành động. Để tôi viết lại.
And that's where we end. A boy from Baton Rouge, a grandmother's sacrifice, a stranger on a plane, and 6 minutes that changed everything. But here's what I keep thinking about, the thing I can't shake. So let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone show up for a stranger when nobody was watching? When they had every reason not to? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if this one stayed with you, share it. Send it to someone who needs it today. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, because there are more Prestons out there, and they deserve to be seen.
And that's the part that stay with me. Not a billionaire, not a private jet. Is a 17-year-old handing back a $100 bill and asking for supplies for community center instead. 183 people on that plane, not one moved. The only person who stood up was a kid from the last row. Someone they grabbed by the arm and told to sit down. And that's the thing about this work. We keep waiting for the people with power to show up. The ones with the titles, the degrees, the money. But on that plane, none of that mattered. The person who saved 2 lives had nothing except a grandmother who taught him that What you carry inside matters more than what you carry in your wallet. Dorothy sold the only thing she owned, so her grandson could board that flight. She didn't know she was putting a hero on a plane, but maybe she did. Maybe she always knew. So let me ask you, when the moment comes, and it will, are you the person who stands up, or the one who looks away and hopes someone else does? Tell me in the comments. And if this one stay with you, share it, like the video, subscribe, because there are more presidents out there sitting in the last row waiting for someone to let them walk forward.